Good afternoon, and thank you for being here for this knowledge share titled Online Concept Testing. What we're going to talk about today is 3 high-tech methods that I've used many times for improving ideas and doing product innovation. So before I get started, I just want to say thanks to Quirks for putting on this virtual event. I think there's a second one in the last few months. Totally appreciate this opportunity to get in front of you people. Many of you who I've met at conferences in the past. Obviously, face-to-face is awesome in person, and the Quirks events of the past several years have been great. So thanks to all of you who I know who are in the crowd, and also those who are new to us and are interested in this topic. So with that, I want to introduce myself. So I'm Ray Fischer. I'm a native Detroiter. I'm the founding partner and AHA CEO. So to give you a little background about me, I was really initially a research user back in the 80s and 90s when I worked at Pepsi. So that was the times that I was, either commissioning studies or being involved from a brand management study in commissioning research. And then I got my technology immersion in 98 to 02, and that was the dot-com, bubble and bust. So that was when I got to know how information architecture was put together. I got to know actual programmers and coders, and got the idea of how to take a vision and turn it into technology. So that's led us to where we are today. And just a little background too, from a research standpoint, I was also a focus group moderator between the years of 2002 and 2012. So I do consider myself an online qualitative pioneer. I did my first online study in 2005, basically using some CRM software. And we actually did launch our first sort of limited platform in 2007 that was called Living Diary. And my partners and I just used that one for ourselves. So it wasn't really out and commercially available, but it was a very solid platform. New code came along, new ideas came along, and the market was much more ready for online qualitative. So we retooled, reinvested and whatnot, and then launched AHA in 2012. So we've been in business about 8 years with AHA. We've grown tremendously, and thank you to all of our clients that are in this crowd right now who've helped us grow and achieve the position we are in the marketplace today. So of note to COVID and coronavirus, this is very interesting. We became Zoom's first global integration partner in 2019, about midway through the year that year. And the significance of that is that we became not only just the first research company to do this, we were the first company in the world to actually integrate Zoom into another platform. So we've been fine-tuning that ever since then, and we've really customized it and made it a proprietary product by adding things like backroom and chat functionalities and different video clippers and highlight reel makers and such to really customize it and make it our own. So relative to our talk today, this is all going to be about responding to the marketplace opportunities in real time and supporting rapid innovation. So away we go. We're here to show you how to quickly design and deploy concept tests. So we've been doing this for years. We've done hundreds of them, using high-tech online insights tools and different methodologies. Online has given us the opportunity to do things a little bit differently, a little more rapidly, and in different configurations. So the benefits of doing this: high-quality market feedback and breakthrough insights help you with innovative product development, with unique brand positioning, helps with advertising and strategic communication development, and also helps you produce disruptive ideas much more quickly than you would have in the past. And the other thing too is it can help shape game-changing strategies, which we've seen have been very volatile in the last 6 months. So we're going to go over 3 different areas or 3 different methods. Okay, the first one is going to be a deep dive qualitative approach. The second one's going to be all about Agile, which will show, some ideas around doing QUAL Agile and QUANT Agile and the risks and benefits of both of those. And then a third, I'll take you through iterative approaches to optimizing ideas or new product development. So with that said, let's dive deeply into the qualitative concept testing arena. So the most important things from a best practice standpoint you want to do here, it all runs on great recruits. So you've got to spend in that area. You've got to pick the right vendor for doing your recruiting. And in these cases, when you do the deep dive qual stuff, where again, you're not going with huge sample sizes, you want to use qualitative recruits. They definitely will bring it better than a quant sample approach. So the other thing you want to do is settle in on the design. What do you want to learn? The objectives need to be crystal clear, okay? You have to settle on those with yourself and with your team, and you have to stick to those. You've got lots of options to how you ask those questions too. So you can pick a template style and you can go, of course, we have templates, other providers have templates, but there's different approaches. And the big difference between those is a lot of people like to do a narrative style, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And others like to use more of a direct approach or even a custom approach to the line of questioning. So the next point here is, concept rotation. For the pros out there, you guys obviously know this, but for anybody new to market research or is just parachuting in here to learn something today, you definitely have to rotate concepts. If you don't rotate concepts and show them in the same order every time, you're going to have order bias. So again, you want randomization as balanced as you can get it, and you want to rotate your ideas. And then you want to determine the tools you want to use to deliver against those objectives. And I'll touch on some of those here today. So when you get study line considerations, the things you need to look at are the number of people in a study, the number of ideas that you want to show, how many days you're going to be in the marketplace, and then kind of the question style. How do you want to do things? So I'll dive in a little bit on these. So the number of people is frequently driven by your budget. Obviously, the more money you have, the more people you can have, but that's not always a great idea. Sometimes you can generate too much data. So depending on how many segments you have, frequently something like 36 people tends to be a really good number. So if you have 3 segments, you can recruit 12 in each. If you have 4 segments, you might want to bump that up to 48. I've seen people do 60 and 80 person studies. And obviously when you get into 100, you're starting to get into quant zones, which can be good if you want to mix and match some quant methodologies in your study. So another key consideration too is time commitment. So you want to understand or make it very clear from an expectation standpoint with respondents how much time it's going to take for them to actually give you the depth that you're looking for around the ideas you're going to share. So you want to set those expectations right with the people, and then you also want to incent them correctly. And just to give you a quick rule of thumb with consumers, which is totally different than B2B, on the consumer side, you're usually, if you're in the market for 3 days or in the field for 3 days, $100 is generally pretty good. 125 is a little bit better. If you go to 4 days, 125 and $150 tends to work from an incentive standpoint. So you're definitely rewarding them. You're expecting them to produce, and they usually do. Again, if you do set level expectations and also do a good job on the screening side. How many ideas? So you can show many ideas, of course, but you want to limit the number per day to like 2 or 3 on a QUAL deep dive. The big reason for that is that when people get too much further than 2 or 3 ideas, they tend to get fatigue and blur. And the fatigue means they'll write less and less around each idea. And the blur, they start, if they get to a 5th idea in a day or a 4th idea, they might start talking about the 1st idea or the 2nd idea while they're actually reporting back on the 5th idea. So fatigue and blur are real considerations. So you want to keep the workload down to about 20 or 30 minutes a day max. Okay. So again, 2 to 3 ideas per day, 20 to 30 minutes max. You want to concept rotate. And I say 3 to 4 max down here in terms of like, if you really had to push it, you could go that far if budget dictated that, or if you had constraints. So on a question style, obviously from concept to concept, the questions need to be identical. 3 to 5 open ends tends to be a pretty good number for each idea. So you may have one quant measure first. And again, it's not a quant study, but from a quant standpoint, you can put in a rating scale, maybe 1 to 5. And it's good for data variance and being able to parse the data later and analyze it. So from a data wrangling standpoint, looking at the 1s versus the 5s is easy to do if you've got a quant measure to kind of give you that keyhole turning point. Okay. So a couple of popular styles. One is narrative and another one is direct. I'll go over those in just a second. And then, oftentimes let's say you have 6 ideas, you spread those over 3 days, you'll usually do a wrap-up comparative activity at the end. Okay. So just to quickly cover direct versus narrative, the idea here on this side, I've got a little quant measure here. You can't really see it too well, but there's a 1 to 5 rating scale there and 3 open-ended questions that followed. Okay. So that's generally a pretty good role. And this is pretty straightforward. Tell us in some detail why you rated the idea as you did, gives you context, of course, and then tell us what you like most about the idea. And if you could change anything, what would it be? Now, in a narrative style, you may start to ask people different ways of answering questions or ask the questions differently. So it might be something like, if you had to reflect on something that this idea reminds you of in your life, a projective question like that can be very effective. Or it could be, hey, if you had to share this idea with a friend, how would you explain it to them? So you get them out of just direct Q&A and more into, somewhat of a conversational projective technique approach. Okay. Now, tools that you can use in concept testing on any of the concept test stuff we're going to talk about today, but we've got timed response, which is the ability to actually show something for a set period of time. In this case, a timer, this is actually showing 11 seconds there, 15 seconds for a packaging idea is pretty normal. What will happen is if you think about focus group moderators who may show an idea for a short period of time, they may hold up a board and say, hey, I want you to look at this for 15 seconds. I'm going to put it down. Same idea with technology. Okay, so this is basically a digital approach to that analog approach. So concept markup tools are also very popular, and you can mix and match some of this stuff together too. But if you've got an ad or something, it's always a cool idea to have them go in and mark it up. Maybe X's where they don't like things, highlight things that they find to be positive. They can drop in a little bit of text as well, and even do a little freehand drawing if you wanted them or encourage them to do so. A star next to their favorite thing is also pretty popular as well. So there's a ton of markup tools out there. These all do heat map as well, but this is probably down here the most prevalent or most popular approach that we see these days for testing ideas. So concepts are basically written on a PowerPoint slide, just in text, then dropped onto the platform, and then people could come in and they can highlight things. So you've got the ability to do different colors. So it might be yellow or green for positive statements that they go highlight. And then there also is the ability to use other colors like red for negative statements. So, and then the end result of that is the ability to then heat map things. And our platform, and probably others as well, allow you to do a lot of filtering and a lot of different analytic approaches to looking at heat maps. So you can look at different segments, different demographic profiles, et cetera, to kind of see similarities and differences between groups. So this next one I want to talk to you about is really what we call quick sprint. Okay, so it's the ability to get in and out of the field quickly in an agile way. And this does apply to QUAL or QUANT or QUANT-QUAL. So you can do hybrid studies as well. So as everyone knows in this room today, in all these multiple rooms, I should say, market conditions are demanding really rapid feedback. So what Agile allows you to do in our quick sprint methodology allows you to get it in and out of the market quickly with quality feedback. There are some risks and things that you need to understand, and we'll talk about those in a couple seconds. So there's a lot of options to get in and out of the field quickly. I'll go over some of those. Again, back to the point about concept testing in general, you've got to be very strategic about the objectives and have laser focus. Now, this is not these agile approaches getting in and out of the marketplace quickly. They are not designed to capture everything you ever want to learn about any subject. They're very focused usually about ideas. And again, mix and matching some hybrid studies, quant and qual, or going from quant to qual. Again, everything has to be consistently focused. You will make compromises. I'll talk a little bit about that, but you need to understand your options, which I will share with you. And then the big question around any concept test is it quant, is it qual, or is it both? And again, in agile environments, you've got to make some quick decisions to get that feedback, quickly and succinctly and hopefully accurately. So key considerations for agile. So the pros on the agile side, obviously rapid deployment. You can go from a questionnaire to the field within hours, okay? So you get that quick market level feedback from pretty much anybody you want to get feedback from. Multiple methods, you can use all kinds of different things. Again, we talked about quant and qual, different kinds of questions, et cetera. Those do come in play here as well, and I'll touch on that. And they also are awesome for rapid innovation. So if you do need to innovate quickly, it's new product development, you need to tweak a message, something cultural happens that you have to respond to in the marketplace, it allows you to get in and out quickly and innovate rapidly. So the cons, recruiting, we got to talk about that, and we will. You've got sourcing opportunities there. They're different, they cost different, and they take different amounts of time. There's a big difference, obviously, between quant and qual sample. So we'll go over that a little bit relative to designing your study size. The other thing is there's less concepts that you can show. You can't really show too many in one sitting. This is all about getting in and out of the marketplace quickly in a one activity or two activity kind of way. You've got limited planning time. You do have to pivot quickly. You've got to move. You've got to trust who you're working with, and you have to trust that sample that you're using to gain your research or gather your research. The other thing is it doesn't work well, Agile is not really great with low incidence recruits, because the thinner or thinner the pool of people that you're seeking is, the more difficult it is to find them. So that can take multiple days. Doesn't mean you can't be agile. You just may not be as quickly as a Gen Pop type simple recruit. Okay, now when we talk about agile, here's the key considerations for that one. So the number of people there, it really does depend. But again, when you look at a quant qual type approach, you're going to need at least 100 for the quant side and probably 30 to 36 on the qual side. Okay, so number of people will affect that. The budget is driven, will suppress the number of people you can have if you are tight on budget. Segments are fine. You can definitely do that in here. And again, time commitment, expectations, and incentive all have to be aligned, and I'll touch on those in a second. So the number of ideas in an agile study, you're really probably limited. On your quant side, maybe you can review 5 ideas, but it's going to be tough within 12 to 15 minutes. But on the qual side, you're probably going to look at something like, 2 or 3 ideas. So if you're doing just a qual exercise, and I'm over here in kind of the time factors here, if you're doing just qual, you're probably talking about 30 minutes. If you're doing a quant qual, you're probably talking 12 for the qual, or excuse me, for the quant, and then about a half an hour or 45 minutes total, including the qual. So a 1-day commitment doing a quant qual should be about 45 minutes. If you're doing just qual, it's going to be about a half an hour. Okay. Concept rotation is in play. And again, you can ask any of the question types that you want, the open ends, the closed ends, the mixed method, hybrid stuff. You can utilize obviously the narrative or direct style again and again. It's always important and nice to do a wrap-up comparative. Okay. So to give you a sense of what a quant qual quick sprint approach looks like. So this is the quant qual version here that you're seeing a visual of. So what would happen is a respondent comes in and they see basically they have 2 activities. This first one here is the quant survey. Again, generally about 12 to 15 minutes. Most of it quant, if not all of it. And in that quant study or that quant survey, towards the end, you're actually going to ask them an opt-in question. Hey, thank you very much for participating in this survey. We'd like to invite you to have the opportunity to proceed into a qual exercise, for which in most cases we'll pay you $50. Okay. Most people do opt into that. So let's say if you've got 100 people in your quant survey, if you have 200, even better. But if you have 100, you're generally going to get about 80 to 90% of those saying, oh, sure, I'd love to jump into the next one. Now you can set quotas in between this phase here and this phase here. So this is your part 2. This is your qual piece or your qual exercise over here, as you see. So they opt in. You can kind of keep people in standby and reach back out to them if you can't hit your quota, if you don't get enough quality responses. Again, if you're doing a quant qual, you can use all qual respondents, but you're probably going to want to use quant sample in that case because of the cost. But you can coach these people up coming over from a quant survey. So they'll come over to your qual and you're basically going to say, okay, here's what I'm expecting. 30 minutes from you. I need some depth and connection. They're going to go through the exercises and they will get paid $50. My feeling is that when you do these, oftentimes you need to kind of double your recruit. So if you need 30 or 35 respondents or quality respondents, you may need to bring 50 people over, because oftentimes quant sample people are not used to really sharing deep emotional stuff and feelings and thoughts and writing stories and giving depth. They're used to clicking buttons. But again, remind them that they're making $50 for doing this. And if they don't do things in a satisfactory way, you just don't pay them. So it's a situation where you bring them in, they will, do the exercise, you go through it at the end. And if you've got 50 people completed and let's say you needed 30 completes and you only have 27, you can reach out to the others that you've got kind of in standby that opted in earlier. Better to have them all go through and it works out perfectly. But again, you got to manage that tightly because you do have incentives involved that the more people that do complete it, like if you don't quota stop, you could end up blowing your budget. Okay. So again, about 45 minutes to do a quant qual. If it's just qual, it'd be about 30 minutes. And again, they'd only see this tile here. Okay. So best practice approach from a sample selection standpoint, it just depends where you want to go. I mean, the quant sample, they're used to taking surveys. Qual, obviously, if you're doing just a qual quick sprint, you're going to use qualitative recruiting. But if it's a quant qual quick sprint, you're going to use likely quant sample, especially if you're going to go 150 or 200 respondents completes, which is typically what our clients do. So that's going to impact cost dramatically. And again, just know that and know the risks, as I mentioned, about data quality, coming from quant sample. You want to screen carefully to avoid frauds and imposters. There's some really awesome questionnaire designers out there. There's a lot of methods for identifying fraud and people who are trying to trick you. We could always talk about that offline at some point in time, but there's some great screener writers out there that use a lot of tricks to identify people before they even, get through the screener. So you want to make sure you're screening carefully. You definitely want to have, as I mentioned, the quant respondents opt into the QUAL if it is a QUAL study. That does work very effectively, and it allows you not to have to go out and re-recruit your QUAL respondents. Okay, so if you do the quant, you don't have to go out and get fresh respondents, you just pull them straight over. And as I mentioned before, know that you'll need about 2x. So if you need, 30 completes, you're probably going to have 50 people or 60 people go through the QUAL exercise, and you'll just throw out the bad data. Okay. On the quant side, from an incentive standpoint, the quant incentives are baked in. The QUAL incentives tend to be for 30 minutes, about $50. Okay. So hopefully that's a pragmatic little explanation to that whole approach. So the third one I want to talk to you about today is iterative approaches to optimizing ideas. So this is the idea of, going through phases. So it does make sense for new ideas to go through iterative market testing. Excuse me. Some of that can be prolonged and over several months, which is kind of the old school way of doing things. And nowadays I'm seeing more and more clients want to get through things in like 3 weeks. So new ideas to the field, get feedback, and maybe go out 2 times to get, refinement and improvement on those ideas. So these ideas and products today are evolved at each stage, and they're evolved rapidly. Okay. And again, as I mentioned, iteration, there are gaps between phases, but again, the more limited those can be, the better you'll be. So researchers and agencies, use respondents, obviously real consumers of their products, both prospects and people that are users, to give feedback to the ideas. So segmentation is pretty important there. And while speed is important, getting it right is the goal. So, sometimes you can't stick to the schedule because of, overriding conditions, but you really need to be on a mission, lay out a calendar, and execute against that. So to give you a visual sense of what this looks like, this is kind of an approach where I've got 3 phases and it goes 3 weeks in total. And this is something that happens, frequently in terms of, study design. So in phase 1, you'll have some initial concept exposure. And I'm just going to give you an example. The sky's the limit. Totally, all kinds of permutations can exist here. But in this case here, I'm suggesting 32 respondents. Maybe you're in the field in that first phase for 2 or 3 days. It just depends how many ideas you have. If you have 9 ideas, you're going to want to take 3 days in the marketplace. It's going to be a QUAL deep dive, as we talked about before, obviously using the concept testing tools that we've mentioned previously. And then one other really cool option is the ability to go in and do live webcam or focus groups. Lots of platforms hopefully have them integrated, or you can use separate tools. On our platform, everything is integrated since we have Zoom on the platform. So respondents will do asynchronous at their own schedule, at their own time each day over the course of 2 or 3 days, do the concept testing. And then at the end of that first phase, you might say, hey, I want to do 10, 45 to 60-minute webcam IDIs on AHA. To go deeper with these respondents. You're going to see people that are unique, that are super special and give great responses. And it's always cool to get a couple from each segment if you can, and, schedule them up for some deeper dive, little conversation, and get a little more insight from them about the ideas and their responses to those ideas. So at that point in time, you might take a week here. So this little arrow here kind of represents a week of you, product teams, agencies, product developers, brand people, et cetera, all getting together and evolving ideas, taking the feedback they've gotten with the research partner and then tweaking the ideas to make them better based on the feedback they got. So then you redeploy in phase 2. And sometimes you go with new respondents. Some of my clients want fresh respondents in each phase, at which point you might go 32, 32, 32. But in this case, I'm suggesting that you take your best respondents, your 25 best respondents, maybe dive them in for 2 days. Maybe you're down to 5 or 6 ideas or 4 ideas at this point. QUAL deep dive, concept testing tools in play. And again, special idea is to pull 10 stars, for instance, and do webcam IDIs. So now you've got, 1 week, a couple days in the field, you got about a week here, then you got a couple days in the field, probably another week here, and then you come out for phase 3, final round of testing, for instance. Now, in this case, you may have lost a couple people along the way. From 25, you might go to 20. And again, star performers, this might be a one day, hey, we're down to our final idea, or we've got our final 3 ideas, or whatever it happens to be. Again, QUAL deep dive, concept testing, and then live webcam IDIs. And in this case here, I might mix it up a little bit and say do 4 groups of 5 or 5 groups of 4, whatever you want to do with those 20 respondents, and actually spend an hour just kind of kicking around those ideas one last time, getting that last respondent level feedback to optimize your ideas. So things that you need to consider here are, agencies, if agencies are involved, and this is, let's say ad development, you've got to stick to a schedule. It's super important that creatives, product developers, et cetera, understand that the time commitment you make with respondents in this next point, the dates, the things that they have to show up for, the times they need to be available, it is super critical that respondents know what's next and that you do stick to the schedule. Have we written notes and said, hey, we're delayed a couple of days, we're tweaking a couple of ideas? Can that happen? Sure. Shouldn't be the norm, and you don't want to string them out much longer than a couple of days if you do need to make an adjustment in the schedule. Okay. And then incentives. Don't be cheap on this. In any research you do, particularly on the qualitative side, where there is time commitment, emotional commitment, people's intellect being involved heavily in your concepts, you want to pay for that. Okay. It's not that much of the budget. It certainly is a chunk of it, but paying a little bit more generally doesn't affect things too much. It does help your retention rates, et cetera, and does keep people engaged. This is especially important as you go through multiple phases. So a phase 1, 2, 3 situation, this might be 3 weeks. You might want to pay these people $350 or $400. So again, it could be less, it could be more, depending on who the target is. So the tools that can be evolved, everything's in play here. So you've got all the tools on the platform, particularly the concept testing tools. You can have people socially talk about ideas together. You've got the webcam or for IDIs or for focus groups available to you. And also, final wrap up, concept evaluation, concept markup, QUAL quant hybrid, whatever you want to do there. You can ask a few quant questions, of course, in a QUAL exercise. You're just not going to project those. And then my final thoughts today, just to kind of share with you, the options are unlimited. Okay. I showed you a bunch of stuff right there, but I will tell you that no 2 studies are ever the same. No 2 concept tests are exactly the same unless a client's using a template that they've created themselves. So the options are unlimited. Your ability to mix and match the tools, to recruit, study sizes, bigger or smaller, depending on your budgets. You've got tons of options available to you. You want to know your risks and opportunities. There are, especially if you go quant to QUAL, with quant sample, you want to understand how to encourage those people to perform at their highest levels and to give you the depth that you're looking for. And then finally, you really need to just pick the approach based on your needs. There are so many different options. I'm eminently available for discussion, design, architecture, et cetera, based on whatever your objectives are. So I encourage you to certainly take a screen capture if you can here of my phone number and my email address and our website, ahaonlineresearch.com. So if there is anything you ever want to talk about, you can certainly write me, of course. You can request a demo. We can just chit chat about study design, recruiting, ballpark, cost estimates as you guys get your wheels turning on what you might want to do in the field. Whether you're experienced or new to online research, we are certainly here to help. So again, thank you so much for being here today. To all my friends, thank you and hello and goodbye. And then to all the new people I met, thanks for jumping in here and listening to what I have to say from my knowledge base of 15 years of doing online QUAL. So with that said, if we're not linked in yet, somebody feel free to go ahead and push that button and get us connected. And have a great day, everybody. Stay well and good luck.